My name is Andrea Ortiz, Commercial Manager for GNF Worldwide. Today with me is John Cooksey, our Associate Director from Australia, and our founding partner, Fernando López de Castilla. They are going to talk about the market overview of Australia and globally. Hi, John.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for having me. Hi, Fernando.
Hey, John, how are you? And hello, Andrea. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Very happy to share this webinar with my dear friend John and talk a little bit about franchising in Australia.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure to be part of GNF.
Well, to start, I'm going to ask you some questions, and you're going to be answering me as you prefer. I'm going to start with you, John. And please tell me, why franchising?
That's a really good question. It's in a country like Australia, it's actually not a question that's asked very often anymore. Franchising has been in Australia since the late 60s and early 70s, and is a really established part of the Australian business and consumer landscape. So in emerging markets, franchising is a great way to start a business with the support of a franchisor in terms of their brand, their operational procedures, their purchasing power, rather than starting a business from scratch. And so that's the main reason why somebody would join a franchise business as a franchisee. For a franchisor, which is really the businesses that we help at GNF, it's really about creating a way to scale their business and arguably grow more quickly than they might be able to on their own. It also helps them go into business with business partners, if you like, whether they're master franchisees in another country or whether they're multi-unit franchisees in their existing country, which is becoming very popular in Australia, or whether they grow simply through adding single unit franchisees, where they've got business partners where they can grow the business together, but also arguably, share the risk at times. So franchising is a very well-established, well-controlled, particularly in this market sector. So it provides great confidence for both the franchisor and their franchisees that they can be successful together.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Fernando, you want to answer why franchising?
Yeah. I think this is the million-dollar question, right? Why franchising? I would ask instead, why not franchising? When we look at businesses globally, it's funny because franchising has been, just like John was saying, has been in our life, for 7 decades now, for over a century already. But the truth of the matter is that still people are afraid of franchising as a concept, right? And I always say that no one buys what they don't understand. And Andrea and John, I travel the world, and it's funny because the word franchising sometimes it has a love-hate effect, right? Some people love franchising, some people are afraid of franchising, but at the end of the day, even if you call it licensing or joint ventures or however you want to call it, I think that, and I'm sure actually, that once someone truly understands what franchising is all about, they trust franchising. So instead of asking ourselves why franchising, I would love to ask everybody here today, why not franchising?
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, John. Well, starting about Australian market, please, John, tell me, what are the main current trends in the franchising market in Australia and globally, of course?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the sector in Australia started very much with the large multinationals, as I mentioned, KFC, Pizza Hut, McDonald's, Taco Bell, and Burger King, and so on. But over the past 10 to 20 years, the sector has evolved much more than simply QSR or restaurants or food franchising. So from a trends perspective, interestingly, the largest franchisors in Australia are in the real estate, automobile, and fuel sectors, which makes a little bit of sense. So all the large multinational service stations are franchised. But the sectors that people think of more commonly that are becoming very popular and have grown a lot include retail, quick service restaurants, mobile services in particular, where people are coming to your home. So whether it's washing your dog, whether it's fixing your roof, it's home handyman style services. And then, as you would have noticed, health and fitness, wellness, beauty, and a lot of those services and the popularity have been driven by economic conditions as well, where I'm not sure what it's like in Spain, but in Australia, for example, there's still a lot of people working from home post the pandemic and post COVID. And so there's a lot more interest in services that are around the home, because it's much easier to do it rather than if you were traveling to the office. Other growth areas include professional services as well, so taxation, accounting, mortgage, marketing. So there's a whole range of services that are different to the traditional, I guess, bricks and mortar franchise that are starting to emerge as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and again, globally, you know, when people think in general about franchising, they think about McDonald's, right? So I think that's good, and not so good at the same time. You know, of course, you know, I mean, nobody can deny what franchise systems like McDonald's have done for the industry, you know. But at the end of the day, and I talk about this a lot, right? Franchising is much more than just hamburgers, right? I mean, we have franchised businesses of almost every sector possibly, you know, around the world. So as John says, indeed, quick service is still very, very strong, you know, even with the healthy trends today and the wellness space that is, you know, growing exponentially. At the end of the day, I mean, everybody eats burgers and pizzas and fried chicken, and that's not going to change in the near future, at least, you know. But it is true that every time we actually develop more franchises within the fitness space or the wellness space, no doubt, you know, retail in general has been decreasing within the last decade for sure. But services are really strong. Actually, in the US today, there are more franchise systems within the service industry than in the food and beverage industry, right? But still, I am a believer in the quick service industry, and I don't think that's going to change in the near future. What do you think about that, John?
Yes, I agree with you, Fernando. It's interesting too. I'm not sure of the mix between services and traditional food and beverage style businesses, but you know, roughly in Australia, which is a modest-sized market, there's over 1,000 franchise systems, and they range across, as you alluded to, every area from dog washing to things in the home. The number of leads that are coming through in terms of people who want to be franchisees has increased this year, for example. So people are still looking to become a franchisee across all aspects of the franchise sector and all the industries within it. There wouldn't be, if you think about it, some of the emerging businesses even include those that are servicing aged care and in-home care and so on. So I doubt there would be an industry in Australia that is not franchised to some point.
That's a little bit about our third question, about what the growth opportunities are emerging for franchising in Australia and globally.
Yeah, that's a good question. Some of the impacts on the potential for growth here, I guess, is we've already talked about different types of industries and the growth, for example, so big growth in health and wellness, naturally a growth in fitness, growth in beauty and personal care. So you know, there's two parts, well, there's three parts really. There's food and beverage, QSR, go and have a meal. There's professional services, business services, so couriers, mortgages, and so on. But then people are really taking on, I think, as consumer confidence improves and interest rates here in particular remain steady with more disposable income, then they're starting to buy services that are more person related. So fitness, beauty, healthcare, allied health, medical, and so on. So they're the sorts of sectors that will continue to grow. The other thing from a business perspective, as opposed to a consumer perspective, is growth trends here, which are probably slower than what they have been, say, in the United States, is the franchise network, and the franchisors are looking to grow quite aggressively through multi-unit franchising as opposed to single unit sales, and also having an existing franchisee who is successful take on a pool or a network of franchises, if you like. So that's becoming increasingly important too.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, John. I mean, in general, and actually, at the other side, of the coin, the big tendency globally right now is, I mean, of course, regarding the industries you John have mentioned, but also, I mean, franchising is every time is more professional, right? So there is this tendency to actually professionalize in franchise systems, right? This, of course, has a lot to do, with the growth of Mambos, multi-unit, multi-brand operators, and the consolidation of different industries within different spaces. But at the end of the day, I think if I would have to choose one trend within the franchising, the franchising space, I would say franchising is getting every time more professional. So my advice to any franchise system out there, for the big guys, but also, of course, for franchise startups, is try to make your franchise system the best you can. Surround yourself with the best experts you can. No one should save on doctors or lawyers, right? So in that sense, don't save, in the help you get for building and launching your franchise system, because at the end of the day, of course, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the great upsides of the pandemic, of which there wasn't many upsides, but it was the increase in the use of technology for a whole lot of reasons. As individuals, QR codes and scanning became, much more, I guess, prevalent because of COVID. But what COVID actually did was it drove franchisors to get as more closely to their franchisees than ever before. Pre-COVID and the pandemic, then they would go and visit their franchisees in person, which in a typical visit cycle might be once a month. In COVID, because of the use of Zoom meetings and technology, they're able to communicate with their franchisees arguably once a week, which enhanced the relationships. It also, I guess, drove them to be able to provide other ways to service clients as well. So it opened up other aspects of revenue potential for the franchise system too. So I think, to your point, like all technology, garbage in, garbage out. So it's really important for an emerging or growing franchise system to budget and plan for the right resources beyond marketing and product development, but technology, field management, legal, supply chain. They almost need to invest in the future and grow the business into the investment, as opposed to try and grow the business through royalties, which is very hard.
Agree. I completely agree, John. And maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I think brands, a brand itself was much more important than what a brand is today. Like intellectual property, I think is very overrated now, because once you go out of maybe 200 brands that would be recognizable globally, then a brand itself means I don't want to say nothing, of course, but it doesn't mean much, right? If it's Bob's or John's or Fernando's Burger, nobody cares. The question is, what does a franchise system offer? How is the business model, and how much technology, how much proprietary stuff you have within your system? And I think that's the future of franchising.
Yes, I agree. We're having this discussion a bit early today with some colleagues. How different can a pizza be? I'm sure your pizza's great. My pizza's also pretty good. But if we make the order and it doesn't arrive in a timely manner, it really really doesn't help, does it? So you're right. The systems and the commitment to the customer experience is really what should be driving a great franchise system.
Yes, and actually, just to comment on that, as you know, I'm based in our Madrid office, and here in Spain it's funny because there are like 300, burger brands within the market, and everybody tells consumers that they have won, the best hamburger prize, right, in this year.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. You are not going to be the next McDonald's because you have won the best smash burger in Spain in 2023. In the real world, nobody gives a damn about the price. The question is, how do you approach quality? And quality in our industry, you of course well know, is about consistency. So the question, the true question here is, how consistent are you in your market and in any market you are? And that's what franchising is all about,
Mm.
Exactly. Another point, which sectors within the Australian franchise market are showing notable growth, John, in your opinion?
We've touched on it a little bit. I think it's the food sector continues to be consistent. So it will have consistent growth, but it has some challenges with regard to supply chain, with regard to property. So property development, it's that nexus between finding a franchisee and then providing them with somewhere to actually open their franchise. So the food and beverage quick service restaurants will continue to grow because it's an easy fallback for, I don't cook every night, to be fair. And so, people will still access that. But then it really is health and fitness, personal products, education services, and some business-to-business services as well. So courier, printing, those types of things. Some of those also becoming particularly important because here the population is evolving and it's spreading. So 70% of our population live in 3 cities, Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. And therefore, as a result of that, 70% of businesses are in those 3 cities as well. What will help, I think, franchisors in the future who do want to expand is for them to have a model that will enable them to be successful in geographic areas. So we are not as spread out as Spain or Italy or a lot of European countries, for example. So there are emerging regional areas that are growing their population. And so the franchisors that can deliver a service in those regional areas, they'll be the ones that start to emerge too. So again, it's health, business to business, technology, for example, and home services. So people that can provide a service without necessarily having to deliver it within 10 feet of the customer.
So, I think John has answered that question excellently. And for the sake of time, just go to the next question, please, Andre.
And how do you think that local culture affect franchising's operation and strategy in Australia specifically and Fernando in general?
In Australia, because of the long history of franchising and culturally, Australians are comfortable with franchising, franchise networks, franchise businesses. There's been a couple of challenges over time, but the government has resolved that through ensuring we have quite a tight franchising code of conduct, which is actually a law, not guidance or a framework as it is in some other countries. So whilst that provides some challenges for franchisors, what it does do is provide the general public and the consumer with even more confidence around franchising and franchise systems and so on. And particularly it also, the biggest challenge with franchising is not creating a cool product. Fernando and I have already created 5 different pizza concepts tonight, but it's about finding franchisees who believe that our franchise network is going to be something they should be investing in. And so culturally here, we have the history of success. We have the large international brands. We have some very successful Australian brands now who have expanded overseas, including companies like Poolworks, pizza businesses all over the world, Specsavers. So we've got a number of Australian businesses that have gone global already. And what that's also lending to the marketplace from a culture perspective is a confidence that Australian franchisors can expand overseas too, without necessarily being a large network. So then culturally there, as a nation, we're quite optimistic and quite positive about how we can do business. We do okay on the Olympic stage. We have great musicians and so on. So we don't lack confidence as a country, and that's reflected in how we feel about franchising too. So moving forward, I think there will be an increase in the number of Australian franchise systems that will look to go global. But they won't wait until they have 150 units here. They will likely try and do it, say, with 25 to 50, but they will need investors and support overseas in order to grow quickly and generate a return on investment for their franchisees.
Yeah, I mean, culture is such a big topic, a deep topic. I'm not gonna even try, to answer this, because I would spend the whole rest of the webinar talking about culture. But the truth of the matter is that if a franchisor is not willing to actually develop intercultural intelligence, better, not to go anywhere else. The culture aspect is so important, so vital for the survival of the franchising industry, that and the fun is that nobody talks about culture. So people a lot of people believe that culture is, that if we are all speak or understand English, that's enough to get along. And culture is just such a deep and complex reality. So at the end of the day, I mean, my only advice to the people that are watching us today would be, again, and I want to insist on this: if you aren't willing as a franchisor to develop intercultural sensitivity and intelligence, I mean, better, try different expansion strategies, but please forget about franchising.
Yes, I agree with that. And we've seen some very good, some great success from some Australian franchisors going overseas who are using a bit of a hybrid approach in terms of growing their business. So moving into markets that are more similar to Australia. So, New Zealand is very similar. The US operates in a reasonably similar way. They've used a hybrid approach. Some have used master franchisees in geographic patches, so Texas, Florida, California, and so on. Others have sent somebody from their own team to America because we kind of relate. Moving into somewhere like Asia or the Middle East or Europe, what the franchisors are doing, to Fernando's point, is much more partnering with master franchisees or large multi-unit franchisees at a local level, and leaning on companies like GNF to provide them with the local expertise, because they recognize that their product might not be the right product for the market, for example, particularly if it's a food product. But even fitness businesses, people purchase and consume fitness experiences differently in Europe than they do here, than they do in the US. And I saw that in the past when I worked for KFC and Pizza Hut, both here and then in Asia, implementing, I guess, changes to our product mix, and our offering here was reasonably simple. Large country, lots of different cities, but everybody culturally reasonably similar. But in Asia, for example, you can have 4 different variations based on culture within the one country, like Malaysia, for example.
Yeah. And changing a little bit the topic, what about regulations? What regulatory changes do franchisees face in Australia, and how can they overcome them?
The regulatory conditions in Australia are very clear and very well documented, and it's been that way since roughly 2019, when there was a review of the regulations and the framework in Australia by the federal government through something called the ACCC, which is the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission. Every franchisor in Australia needs to be registered in the franchise register, and that allows consumers, so people who want to be franchisees, to review franchisors, how long they've been in business, the size of the business, projected revenue, and so on. And then the franchise agreements, which are the first stage of purchasing a franchise, are all consistent and all covered by the same framework. So for a franchisor who's looking to put a business together, as Fernando has suggested, which is with the best of intentions, a well-developed framework that's well-resourced and well-funded, then the regulatory framework here supports a successful business. It also includes guidelines for mediation and problem solving. If things will go wrong, a franchisee will change their mind. A franchisor will open a franchise in a location that's not necessarily perfect. So there are guidelines and frameworks for resolving things too. So it's very transparent, and with the right local support, legal and so on, there are really no barriers to a franchisor starting in this country.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I mean, a lot of people get afraid when they hear about franchise law and franchise regulation, And the truth of the matter is that even in the States, which is of course the most regulated country in the world, franchise-wise as well, is as long as you follow the guidelines, you have nothing to worry about. And something very important for our friends here today is very important to keep in mind that any franchise law or franchise regulation in the world, even in the US and Canada and France and Saudi, and in any highly regulated country, at the end of the day, they only regulate the disclosure process before the signing of the franchise agreement. So, I mean, in my opinion, franchise law is not that important. It's not guarantee of the professionalism of the franchise system by any means. It's just a process designed to protect the candidate, the future franchisee, to get enough information from the franchisor. But that's it, So franchise law is not guarantee by any means of the professionalism of the franchise system itself. And it should be treated as it is, just some guidelines regarding the disclosure of information before the signing of the franchise agreement, and that's it.
Yes, I agree with that. There are so many more things that are more important to the success of a franchise network and an individual franchisee than the original agreement.
Talking a little bit about entering to Australia, what are the best practices for establishing and expanding a franchise in Australia, John?
I think one of the keys to entering Australia is to have a long-term plan that's well-structured and well-funded. It's a reasonably mature market, so it's not our population is not huge. So it's not like a franchisor would be entering a city with 15 million people. Our cities our two biggest cities are around 5 to 6 million, so to speak. And historically, whilst there's over 1,000 franchisors, the average number of franchisees per franchise in the past 10 years across the entire sector has remained reasonably consistent. So what we're finding is, whether it's a local business, so again, Fernando and I started a pizza chain in Australia through hard work and a bit of sweat and some help from friends and product, we can grow it ourselves to 30 units. The challenge is then scaling beyond that. And what we find is from a land and expand perspective or a local growth perspective, starting the franchise is not challenging. Having the plan, the right executives, the right investors, the right marketing to grow it beyond that initial 25 to 30 to 150 will require a very well scoped out and funded expansion plan. So often there's a case most recently of a very successful US burger chain that is going into receivership here because they didn't plan beyond the first 18 months.
Awesome, yeah. So, I mean, Andrea, tons of strategies, tons of approaches, tons of ideas to discuss. I know we don't have much time today, so I would just want to say about this that, and I always try to be practical, And at the end of the day, franchising is about people, It's really not about systems, and technology platforms, and operating manuals and the product or the service itself. I mean, those stuff, of course, are very important, right? But franchising at the end of the day is about people, franchising is about a relationship between two parties. So I think that as long as there is the willingness and the professionalism between the two parties, the franchisor and the franchisee, everything should go well. Okay.
I agree with that, Fernando. I think it is all about people, and it's about investing in the right people at the right time as well. And it gets a bit back to the culture part too. I think it would be wise for a franchisor coming to Australia to invest in a very senior leader who has run successful businesses before, maybe even cross country, for example. Maybe even senior Australians who have worked in franchise networks overseas and looking to come back into the country, who could come in and help them set up the business and lead the team properly, but also make them more attractive to local investors, because I think that second level of investment will be required at some stage to grow the business.
Agree.
Thank you. And in order to close this amazing webinar, I'm going to ask you the last question about international expansion. John, what are the keys to successful market entry and expansion strategy for Australian brands in international markets?
I think it's particularly important for the Australian brands to do a detailed competitor analysis on the markets that they're going into and really compare that market to the market conditions here. So we talked quite a bit about culture and resources. It would be naive to think that every brand here could simply go into another country and be successful. Partnering with the right people at a local level around culture, taste, if it's a food product, legislation, regulation, how to market to the local consumer, for example, is particularly important for brands from here moving overseas. And again, it gets back to that investing in the success of the future. I know of some systems who have gone overseas and they're adding two franchisees a month, if that. That can become very expensive and very frustrating very quickly. To Fernando's point, if we raise it up to what franchising is really about, it's about relationships. And if you're going into another country and you're trying to convince locals to spend a lot of money, in reality, on your business, and yet there isn't anybody in country to build the relationship, isn't anybody in country who understands, maybe not necessarily their language, but the way they go about business, then it'll be very hard to get traction quickly. The other part is in looking to grow through master franchisees overseas, particularly important to do due diligence on the masters or potential masters themselves, because they may be very good at food, but they might not necessarily be good at fitness if they're looking to take on another brand. So a lot of planning and due diligence is particularly important, and then making sure the cultural piece is tied in is essential.
I agree. I mean, going international or going global, if you will, it's not quick, it's not easy, and it's not cheap. Whoever tells you otherwise, please, run away,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think that going global is possible. And my only advice here would be get the best help that you can buy, basically, that you can pay, It's not only about the know-who, but also about the know-how. So I think that going global is possible. Again, it's not quick, cheap, or easy, but I think that with the right resources and the right help is possible. So I wish all of you today a happy day. And again, it's possible. You just have to do your homework.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John, for your time and your expertise in the Australian market. And I hope to see you again, Fernando and John.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you very much, John. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Fernando. Great to see you too.